Hello, everyone. How you doing? It's really not that many people, so you can talk. Let's make it interactive.
Yeah, if everyone wants to move towards the front, like, don't be shame, be game.
True, true. Before we introduce ourselves, which is nice that they put some pictures up there because we forgot pictures, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are on today, the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. Pay my respects to their elders and their ancestors. I also like to pay respect to all the deadly mob here today. Thank you for coming and listening to us talk again. But we love you so much. Thank you. And also, now we can introduce ourselves. Brooke, do you want to go first?
Sure. So kaya nyan ko Brooke Collard, nyan kort nyan kort jerp to ba wanganin don kort. So my name's Brooke Collard. I'm a Baladong Wajak Nyunga woman. I live in Broome, so I've come a very long way to be here. So I think that'll be something really cool we can talk about today, is like being able to stay on country with games is a really huge thing. I actually started in film. So I used to play video games when I was younger, didn't even think about it being a job option, living like rurally. And then anyway, just through life and random events, I ended up in film. And I've worked on projects like, if any of you have seen The Great, that is on Stan. I was the note taker for season 1, season 2. So yeah, getting to work with Tony McNamara was really wild. Same guy who wrote The Favourite, if any of you guys have seen that, or the one he did recently with Emma Stone, that was the random Frankenstein sort of film. Yeah. So I have his email. No. Done that. Just worked on like a lot of like film and television. So Sweet As, I did like extras coordinating on that. So there was a lot of like wrangling aunties, making cup of teas, babysitting grannies.
Important work.
Important work. That's not on the job description, but it is what needs to be done. And then I've also done podcasting. So Noongar Wellbeing. We have a season 2 coming out very soon for Mental Health Week. So if any of you guys want to listen to that. I was joking to Barmy before that I was going to make everyone do a meditation exercise before we started, but I'm not going to put anyone on the spot like that. Yeah, that's mostly me. I met Barmy at South by Southwest last year, and on the spot he just went, "Do you want a job?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So that's how I ended up in games.
You were in games just before that, though.
Oh, yeah, like, but let's not talk about that.
Okay, we won't talk about that. But you had dabbled in games a little bit before that as well. Yeah,
so I actually was a writing consultant on Broken Roads. So they didn't research who I was beforehand. They lucked out that the country that they based the game on is actually my country. So around Wave Rock, like Baladong country. So I knew all the significance of the area. I know like my language as well. So yeah, I haven't played the game yet. So I don't know how much of my input ended up in the final product. But yeah, I'll have to give it a play and find out.
Maybe. Cool. I've got to follow that up.
Yeah, who are you?
Not that exciting. I'm not that exciting. But yeah, so I'm Ben Armstrong, Wiradjuri man. I have worked in technology and I guess now I can say creative industries for over 24 years. I spent a lot of time working in tech and of my career, and worked my way up from an engineer to a manager of global teams, and then made a shift into more, I guess, community and advocacy work for First Nations people in technology, and then into the creative industries, which what we call the creative industries, which I think is an interesting name for stuff because there's a lot of technology in this industry. I am formerly of Awesome Blak, same as Brooke here. We did have the I don't know, I'm fairly certain it was the only full-time First Nations digital games team in the whole of the continent, until recently when the organisation decided to restructure games completely out of their strategy. So we had a whole other presentation planned around how we were successfully, that's really funny to say, successfully navigating the mission statements that GCAP put out, because I thought it was a very interesting approach this year with the mission statements and how we were successfully navigating that those statements as First Nations people with our own agency. So Brooke and I have done the best we can to try and remove a whole bunch of stuff and shift that talk to be a little bit more broad today. So do apologise for the slides, as they have a lot of content that's not in there that probably would have been in there. Other than that, yeah, we met, as I said, at South by Southwest, and I knew who you were, but it wasn't until I started having this conversation with Brooke about what work she had worked on. And I'm a huge advocate of transferable skills and identifying the skills of people, even though they're not in an industry, as to being able to come into an industry or be able to come into a career path that they may not have thought that they could be in, and succeed with the right sort of support around them. So that's why I offered you a job basically straight away, because I was like, oh, you could totally do this, 100%. Like this, if I can do it, you can do it for sure. But today, oh, you got the click? Is it working?
Oh, is it?
Oh, look out!
Right. I can like stand up and do it.
I got it. Huh? Oh no, it's actually not even moving now. Hey, spacebar works. Spacebar works. Okay, so First Nations Story Agency. I think initially you might sit there and think this is like how we're going to tell stories. But it's actually more deep than that, right? It's not just about how do we how do you as non-First Nations people, Indigenous people, and how do Indigenous people have agency over the storytelling? It's not just about the actual act of writing a story or writing a narrative. It is a lot more. There's a lot more depth to that and a lot more nuance to it. So we're still going to go through these mission statements and then kind of like, I guess, have a yarn about how we came back to this, right?
Yeah, because the word I think of all the time is Wabrinyan. So in Noongar, that's like holistic well-being. So that's like everything, like mental, spiritual, like physical. So when I'm thinking about like story agency, it isn't just the fact of like, you know, you get to create something that you get to express yourself or get a message across. It's actually like, again, it goes back to well-being. It's really important, like not just for accurate representation and making sure that, you know, people are seeing themselves like reflected in like screens, games, media of all forms. It's just about like, it's that healing process by being able to do that. So, you know, for myself, like the biggest thing that I've found across like film and games is just like, we have a huge community of like support in the First Nations like gaming community. So, because we're all like in it together, and like we'll go into this later as well, but so many things are different when you're leading companies with a First Nations led model. Like our concepts of like economy and like familial support, community support are completely different to most companies. And to be honest, I think everyone should lead from like a First Nations lens, because it's more about like, you know, making sure everyone as a collective is like doing well. It's not about just putting the like onus on one person to be responsible for yourself, because sometimes like you're not in a position to actually be able to help yourself. If you're not guessing, I'm a major advocate for mental health. So, but yeah, I'll pass to you.
No, I mean, if we look at, so we're still going to keep the theme. As I said, we had different slides, but we're going to keep the same theme here. So, because I think it's important to talk about how First Nations people, as I said, we've got our agency in the industry and how we approach this and how this can help, you know, inform and maybe help other people understand how we actually were, and I still do honestly believe we were very successful at Awesome Blak, but the things that we did along the way. So sorry, we're sitting down, so I will turn my head here. So when we talk about things that are around built to last, and it's been a challenging year, really, I would never have guessed that. However, we've seen these cycles before. How do we ensure that we don't falter in the face of adversity? And let's explore the foundational pieces that needed to stand steady. So first and foremost here, what Brooke and I were talking about is investment in the people and the relationality of those people and not the studio. That doesn't ring any more true than it does for us today. When we first met, and it was about this investment in people, right? Like you said, you never worked in games, and I was just like, you want a job, right? And for me, I was like, well, you've never worked in games, but that shouldn't stop you from having a career in games, right? So how can we invest in the people? So at Awesome Blak, what I did, and I do this all the time, is how can we create these opportunities for people to come into organisations, and we'll always look at this from an Indigenous perspective and Indigenous lens. creating opportunities for them to get in, but then ensuring those opportunities are there for them to succeed going forward, okay? Never assume someone's going to come to the industry with the right amount of experience. I was speaking to someone yesterday who was like, a junior role requires 4 years experience and 2 shippable titles. Okay, so first thing you can read into that is, I actually want someone with lots of experience and I don't have enough money to pay you. That's all that is, right? So when we look at this from people who are wanting to get into this space and into this career and grow, we have to create a model that is completely opposite to that. It's not, I want to pay you less but expect you to have all the skill. It's, I understand where you are. I'm going to try and pay you as much as I can and pay you a full-time salary, which is what we did at Awesome Blak. They were full-time jobs. And we're going to give you everything you need to grow and succeed in that path. So an interesting aspect of this, though, is how we invest in the people. We're not investing in the studio. We're not investing in the game, so to speak. We're investing in the success of the people, because if they're successful, the game or the project will be successful. Right? I know that sounds like common sense, but I often find this is something that we do at a community level as blackfellas, where we invest in people, we invest in the community, we invest in, the, as you said, the well-being, and usually without a consideration of what is that end goal, because we know that will create an end goal out of it anyway. There will be an outcome out of that if we do it that way. What do you think about how we approach that, Brooke, at Awesome Blak, in our previous former artists formerly known as role?
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna go back in time to before Awesome Blak. Because I just think about how we couldn't be here today without the people who have helped us get to where we are. So, you know, we always start off with acknowledgements to talk about, you know, the land we're on, the significance, and like, you know, just acknowledging the people who have created the beautiful space that we can be here and that we can safely be here as well and looked after. Especially as like a lot of us mob aren't like from specifically here. So for myself, like just going back to talking about, you know, those restrictions of like how much you need to get a position, and the amount of work that you have to do on the ground. Like I go back to my family, like my great-grandparents only learnt to read because of the church that they helped build in Pingelly. So my family were all like Jehovah's Witnesses, so they built like the first one of those churches in the country. So as much as I am not religious myself, I'm also like, well, they were the only ones who gave my great-grandparents that opportunity to learn to read, because other people were denying them education back then. Even my grandparents were taken to missions as well, and you know, the language that was used back then is still used today, which are things like sponsorship. And back then, you know, they were working without wages on farms. So there's like lots of things now where at least like people are starting to, you know, get that paid back, hopefully. Like I know WA side anyway, my mum's looking into that sort of stuff. So this is the context of, you know, what we have to grow up with and how we basically have to start from scratch, from the ground. So, you know, you think about that economically as well. I do not have anything that I'm going to inherit from anybody, because we haven't had those opportunities. We haven't had the chances to build generational wealth like some people possibly have. So there, again, like I then going into the education space, going to university and studying, I had to apply for a whole bunch of scholarships. The only way I actually got there, because like my mum couldn't contribute to me moving away, I worked straight away out of school. Like I didn't go and have like a big break, didn't go on a Kentucky tour like everybody else. Just spent the like summer just like saving up, working at Target.
100.
Yeah, and then but then once I was actually there at uni as well, because this was back in the day when Centrelink still classified me as a dependent at home. I was barely getting paid enough to pay the rent at university. So, and I've spoken to a lot of mob who, this is their same experience going to university as well. I had to look around my dorm room like every week to work out what I could pawn off in my bedroom to be able to afford food that week. So that's like a common experience of a lot of mob people going into these educational institutions. So, you know, you're stressing more about like, am I going to eat tonight? Instead of actually having that like, you know, freedom to work out like, okay, like I can just focus on the study and learning these things. So I just wanted to bring that context in, because when you're talking about there's those barriers there that are talking about, oh, I need like 4 years experience of volunteering to do all this stuff. Like that's a very privileged position to have to come from to like, you know, get into these positions. And so it's not actually helping bring people up. It's actually like just supporting other people who are already coming from possibly privileged backgrounds.
Most definitely. And, you know, there's a whole great talk there, and I love to get on my soapbox about the exploitation of entry-level candidates, Indigenous candidates into tech careers. But you look at Will Kennelly is not here today with us. He was a developer on our development team, and he was like, what, 21 years old? 21 years old, couldn't get an opportunity in a video games development studio. This is a kid who went straight from high school into Microsoft. Like, he's not... he has the skills, let's say, to pay the bills. But he couldn't get a job in games industry, right? So we created a role and gave him a role and got him training. And I honestly have never seen someone pick up an engine and document it so well in 6 months of experience, right? Creating opportunities and paying people well for those opportunities, it's surprising what you see, the outcomes that you get from that instead of trying to exploit them. So bringing it back to Built to Last, this should be our quickest slide because Awesome Blak didn't last.
But in saying that though, like, you know, it seemed from what I'm seeing anyway, my very short 8 months at Awesome Blak, you know, like there's this book called Press Reset. Have any of you read that yet? Oh, okay. Add that to your list. Yeah, sort of. They also wrote another book before that called Blood, Sweat and Pixels. Have any of you read that one? Yeah. So that's the one right after that. And, you know, it does talk about that already, like just how volatile sometimes like game companies are. But I guess, you know, just going back on that, like just our experience recently, if you look at the Press Reset book, at least like, you know, they usually have the opportunity to ship it, but unfortunately we didn't get that chance to at least be able to like show kind of like what we were doing, because like we got like really far actually with like the resources that we had available to us, you know, and like considering, you know, a lot of us are kind of like starting from the ground up and like we're all kind of like newbies going in. You know, Will and I got like a really like great shorthand getting there like right at the end, and like we started to actually, you know, you're beginning and you're like, oh, I'm not really seeing much progress, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, whoa, like heaps is happening right now. So yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a shame. I mean, for those who did not see anything, but for those who did see something, they were actually incredibly blown away by what we had put together, and that was supposed to be released in like, I don't know, a couple of weeks. Anyway, adapting. This is more interesting. And look, we just put up some words there because we were like, what are we going to talk about now? And how do we talk this to agency? Adapting to the constant change. I don't think that anyone can sit there and say that blackfellas aren't good at adapting. We are probably the most adaptable people on this continent. And when we bring this into the industry, and we're talking about our agency around storytelling, it's about what I think is really interesting is how we have adapted to new technologies to tell our stories. But what I am also interested in, and this is me just kind of doing a little bit of a reflection, is how the rest of the industry hasn't adapted to us. What I find is that there is a huge demand for our agency, our storytelling, but there's not a huge demand for our agency, right? People want to tell us what to do, how to do it, right? We can adapt to that. Like, we can sit there and go, okay, sure, you want us to do it this way? No problems. Like, or you want us to use this technology? No problems, right? Like I said to Will, I know you know how to use Unity, but I would love for you to use Unreal. And he's like, why do I want to use, why? No, I'm really good at Unity. And I said, yes, but your career progression, I think, is in Unreal. And I still stand by that decision. But he adapted to that, right? And he figured out a way to be able to integrate his storytelling techniques into that engine in new ways. You had to adapt to new technologies coming from film, right? And what I did was I had to adapt to giving everyone the space to learn that in their own time whilst managing a budget, which is really, really interesting aspect. So I think that we have a lot of great examples of how we were able to do this, but the one that I really want to tap into, because I think it's a really big issue, is adapting to remote working. And I think that there is nothing more empowering than working remote. I love to work in my PJs and have all my coffees or whatever and tea at home. But this is not the point. The point is that the talent that I had found that I wanted to work at Awesome Blak on this game was in Broome, was in Brisbane, I was in Sydney, and I was never going to ask blackfellas to come off country. I was never going to ask blackfellas to come and live in one of the most unlivable cost of living cities in the world. And so I then had to adapt. I had to, and I'm okay with that. I've managed people in Malaysia and Singapore for a large portion of my life. Remote teams, not an issue to me. But remote teams making a video game or a digital game is a little bit different. This is not just people getting work and necessarily and going, okay, I've got my task for the day, I'll get my job done. This is a creative process. This is collaboration at another level. And I think we initially had difficulty figuring out how to keep our agency, but collaborate remotely, just because of the intense collaboration required. Not because we didn't know what to do, but just that we had to remain in such high levels of contact, I think. And I personally think I failed there sometimes because I'd be at events or I'd be here and there, you know. But I think that's the real takeaway here, is that for me in this experience is that it can be done, and we did do it, but it was still actually quite, we were still getting better at it. We had not figured that out. There's no rule book for that, really. I don't know. What did you think about in regards to the agency for yourself in the ability to tell the story and what we were doing and your story, but work on country? I know it's a very complicated question.
So
work
many
on
things
country
going into this.
and then work with Will and then work with me and then and you were 3 hours behind. So it's 6 a.m. and we're beaming at 9 or 10. I'm interested to hear you, because I know I can sit here all day and just talk about how we, I think we smashed it, but...
yeah, well, I would agree with that as well,
yeah.
because we had all those possibly hurdles in the way, but I'd say they were actually our strengths, because just leaning into that story agency and adaptability, all our mobs across the country were also different, so even if you just look at something like artwork, not all of us do dots, and just putting it out there in case anyone isn't already aware, if you're not an Indigenous person, you shouldn't be doing Indigenous art. This is an argument I had with someone once, which I thought was pretty straightforward. But yeah, even with that, the story we were creating around Fear of a Black Planet when we were working on it came originally from Travis. So, he's different mob from me. He's Gamilaroi and I'm Noongar. So, I was writing a lot of the story based off of his own IP. But again, in that, I was still informing that from my own experiences and perspective as a Noongar woman. So, so much of it was based in place and just actual things that I have experienced, things happen on country that I'm yep, there is more to the world than we know. I could tell horror stories for days of what's happened at nighttime camping. So things like that were getting chucked in, because it's it's things that have happened when you acknowledge the power of country, this power of ancestors and spirits that are around you. So for that, I would write the story based off of things that I know culturally from my area, but then I would still go back to Travis and we would say okay, this is how I've written it and what's informed what has come about here, but what's your version of this? Is this still kind of a middle ground? Because again, we weren't making a Noongar game, so still had to find a middle ground of collaborating with Travis at the time to work out what worked best with his original story.
And that's another incredible layer to to the storytelling from a blackfella's perspective, because I am going to go on a whim here and say not many non-Indigenous people would sit there and go, I'm telling a story based on the country I'm on, but this is set in some other location. I know that I specifically critique games sometimes when I look at them and I go, well, where are you basing this game? And therefore, how are you referencing that country? Which is that unique perspective that we bring. But it actually is quite a challenge, I would imagine, to sit there and go, I'm on my country, writing from my background, history and my stories, with again, the way I do it, but this is actually set in another country, and how much do I know that? And we were very agnostic in country for that reason, because we didn't want to potentially make those mistakes. But that is a really interesting flip on that, having that agency where actually you probably didn't have as much agency as you could have had, but that's primarily because of the nature of you having to adapt to, this is not actually my story. I'm writing a different story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If I was writing a Noongar game, that would have been just me in a frenzy writing too much, and you would have had to pull me back.
Yeah.
But like on that though, like again, this is why like our structure at the time was like so different to most companies, is like we had a full development week before we even started anything, where we got the team all together and we were like out on the country that, you know, Travis is from. So like we got to physically see the place, like hear it, smell it, like everything's so important in that sense. Because I know I said I wasn't going to make you all do like the podcasty, meditation-y stuff that I normally do. But like even, you know, I go back to like Noongar language, right? Like it's... yeah, if you listen to my podcast now, so like even things like the birds, like we don't name them because we're like, oh, like, I don't know, that's a red-tailed black cockatoo. We name it like based off the name it's actually telling us itself. So, you know, as one of my cousins says, it takes a lot of the ego out of it, because it's not like I'm going to go, oh, my name's Carnaby, so I'm going to name that cockatoo the Carnaby cockatoo, because it's already telling you its name. You just have to listen.
I love that.
Yeah, so like that's kind of like what we did again in that development week, is like just to like go over and like understand how we're like different and the same, and then like collaborate in that and adapt. But if we're going to like, into like technical stuff, like again, writing scripts for film is so different, because I would just pull out Final Draft and I would just like beat it out, and then I'd say like, I'd write a script on my own and go, okay, can someone help me make this movie? Let's do the budget, and like you do it like that. But games was so different, and like that was something I really had to switch my brain to, like not just switching from Final Draft over to like Artisy and working out like how to do like writing for like basically an RPG is what we were doing. And like coding in stuff that would change outcomes. It was like, I was like, yes, my childhood of like reading choose your own adventure books is becoming real right now. But yeah, like, you know, we had to change in that sense, and like the workflow was so different to what I'd previously been used to, where I'd just like so like solo on my own, but every time we'd do something I'd have to come back and be like, okay, this is what I've come up with, and I'd just be like, blah, 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 like this is going to happen, and then this crazy thing's going to happen, and then Ben would be like, okay, cool, how does this work with Will? Is this fun? Does this work? So that was like, I guess where I had to adapt a lot.
and that yes, that's all I've got to say. That was great. Okay, let's keep moving, otherwise we're running out of time. Global opportunities. Oh, yeah, okay. This is a really good slide for you. I'm going to start. You want to kick off because you wrote a bunch of this stuff here, and then I'm going to kick into some issues I have with this.
Oh, what did I write again?
This is universal truth there, and you got the never alone up there, and how you can actually have a global impact.
Yes.
And we learn a lot of this at Whare Karioi, right?
Yes.
Yeah, shout out to Whare Karioi.
Yes, right in the front.
We learn a lot of this, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I guess global opportunities. It's so interesting, right? So again, this is like my own personal opinion of like, again, like working between film and games. And I would say if you're, again, because I produce as well for film, so my brain is also very like logical budget schedules as well. And I have to switch my brain when I'm going to the writer side, because I have to go, okay, no, we're not thinking like that right now. We have to do the fun stuff. But if I turned that brain on, it's even things like marketing and everything. I feel like Australian funders are really scared to fund our projects. But one thing we found, especially when we went to Whare Karioi, is that it seems like the Asian market's a lot more aligned with First Nations values because our community ideals are actually really, really similar. You know, we're more so about like, the community over the individual. And like, you know, even like you look at Japan, for example, like they place a lot of importance on like the country significance of it and spirits as well. So yeah, I think like for myself, like that's what I kind of see. If we talk about like Whare Karioi as well, so that was specifically the first ever First Nations gaming summit. Yeah, so that's a photo of all of us there in front of one of the marae in Aotearoa. So as you can see, there's a lot of us, right, from around the world, which is pretty special. And again, this is another side note, again, for like different cultures connecting across the oceans, right? So you can see how like it's got that like orangey, like red sort of tinge on the building. I remember asking at the museum, like, what did you mob use to paint that? And they use ochre as well. So I was like, that's so cool. We're like connected in that way as well. So same thing, different uses. But it was just like really amazing to see because I'm Never Alone. Have any of you played that game before? Quite a few people. Pretty good.
Surely.
So with that game, I specifically looked up how much it earned because that's like a big success story of a video game company working with Indigenous peoples. So that one, I think it earned close to $3 million, which is pretty huge.
It's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. So with that one as well, like it's not just about, you know, that economic outcome. It's like mostly about, you know, it's that archiving of stories so that things don't get lost because things have been so oppressed in the past that there is a lot of knowledge, a lot of language that has been lost to time, unfortunately. So that's where it was really cool to like be able to see that game, play it, and you know you'd unlock certain parts, and then all of a sudden there was like basically little documentaries of all the elders sharing like what the cultural influence was to get to that part of the game. So I think that's something that's like really special in games as well that you don't find in another medium. Is again that immersion. It evokes a lot more empathy straight away that you can like see exactly what's going on and like understand from emotion more so than I'd say any other medium. Yeah.
And one of the things about Never Alone, and this is the thing I brought up with the E-Line team who attended Whare Karioi in Aotearoa, was one of the things that we did, we had this big, don't worry, you're not allowed to know about it because if you weren't there, you don't know. So, but we did this thing and it was like going around, we'd have a yarn and go kōrero, go around the room. A lot of Indigenous people were influenced and impacted by Never Alone. Okay, a lot, globally. And when I got a chance to speak to the E-Line team, and this got asked later on with the Alaskan mob as well, was I asked them, did you realise how much global impact you had on Indigenous people? And they did not. They did not. Why? Because it's a game. You look at it in dollars, you look at it in sales, you look at it in, you know, wish lists and downloads and all this stuff. But that just doesn't matter to Indigenous people. We didn't care about that. What they cared about was that they had, in their perspective, seen the first time Indigenous culture represented authentically in a game. And what the interesting thing out of that I took out of this conversation about Never Alone was it took 10 years for them to actually see community impact. 10 years, okay? They thought they were going to create community impact like that, and it didn't happen. And they were like, why isn't this happening? And they didn't realise that it takes time, okay? It's a long game. It's not a short game. It's not a production, it's not a budget, it's a long game impact. So at E-Line, they now have someone from that community who's a game developer working in the studio. And the community owns, 30 or 40% of E-Line, right? So the community has now bought into the studio, into the production studio. So it's now, you know, the community leader is now on the board and the chairperson of the board, right? These are things that take time. But the global opportunity is there. Whare Karioi, I think we've got another picture, don't we? Hey, look at it, it's me.
There we are.
Okay. So as we flip the slide, just while I talk, the big thing I have with global opportunities, and I 100% agree with you around a lot of Asian countries, I find, and I've found in my career, whenever I travel through Asia, I am able to connect with those people very, very quickly, very, very easily, because I just and be who I am, and there's an easy way to connect to them through their culture that way. There is a large demand for First Nations or Indigenous stories across the world. and there is a significant amount of that profit going to non-Indigenous people. So this is the biggest challenge I have with the state of the industry and First Nations agency around our own stories. And one of the mission statements at Awesome Blak was that we were creating the end-to-end pipeline of Indigenous economic viability through these stories. And that's really important because you will often see a non-Indigenous studio, because they're the only ones who have the capability and the capacity to deliver something at scale internationally, with an Indigenous storyteller. That's great. It is actually great, but it's still pretty shit, right? Like, we're going to pay, 10 grand for someone to tell us their story, and we're going to go and make $7 million on the international stage with, our VR, AR, XR, Unreal, whatever, right? That is, in my eyes, and always will be in my eyes, $7 million that could have been in blackfellas' hands and in communities and capacity building and all of those things, right? I draw back to a conversation that I once had with Turtle Island Mob many, many years ago when I was in tech around proper partnership and how this can create economic change, growth, and opportunity. And of course, this is my soapbox. I'm going to get on it for a little bit here, and I'm going to turn it into a games reference, my holy trinity of blackfellow advancement. And it is not tank healers and DPS. It is land back, capital, and power. And so Turtle Island Mob got their land back, and that allowed them to create the opportunities to create capital, and that gave them the power of choice and the power of decision around what they were going to do. Specifically, these mob who do agriculture. Sure, it's not games, but it's basically the same. So they're doing agriculture, and John Deere walks in, big tractor company, and they're like, we're going to give you all these tractors because we want to help First Nations people. We want to help Native people. And they went, cool, thank you. Those tractors are really awesome. We can't use them. And they're like, why? And they're like, because culturally we do not till the soil, and all your tractors till the soil. And John Deere went, oh shit, sorry, that's actually really bad. Okay, how about this? Instead of giving you a bunch of tractors, we will build an innovation and education center on your country. We will train your young people on how to actually modify our equipment, and then you can modify it so it's culturally aligned to your practices. And that created jobs, it created career paths, it allowed them to then, of course, John Deere to tick their DE&I box, and it allowed them to have these opportunities for young people to come in and learn technology, learn agriculture, learn agri-tech, learn how to do all these things that were cultural practices, right? So I look at that and I go, there is a way forward, in my opinion, for First Nations agency in video games and digital media and XR and metaverse, or whatever the hell people want to call it, opportunities, but it has to be grounded in that level of partnership. It has to be, how is this actually helping blackfellas, and not how is this helping us look really good because we brought this blackfella story to the global stage, because I'm not here for that. And so that's my real hot take, because there's not many people in here, so I can do hot takes. Let's go. Let's go. Discoverability. 40 games released on Steam every single day. Oh, look, man, these numbers are getting wild on Steam. Can I start with this one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, it's basically what I just said. Okay, except I'm going to throw in, because we're now talking about games, I'm going to throw in this little tidbit here, right? So if you were to follow a typical pitch deck to a publisher and Google all the great pitch decks there are for publishing, and hey, this is what publishers want to see, right? One of the things that you put in there, right? What are your games influenced by or inspired by? Okay, so I'm inspired by these games, and these are the genres, yeah? So for us, it was things like Firewatch and Hill Agency, Purity and Decay. Incredible Indigenous game, by the way. You honestly got to go buy it. Please go buy it, because they're an incredible studio. And a little bit of Wayward Strand in there, like different things from different elements of different games, right? And it's easy enough for us to sit there and say, these are the games that we were inspired by, and these are their suggested revenue, because we know that's not accurate. But it gives publishers an opportunity to sit there and go, oh yeah, we know those games. But none of our games were those games. And at its heart, our game was a First Nations story. So you go and put that tag into Steam and come up with 0 results and 0 revenue. And then go and put that in front of a publisher and see if they, in this market with this risk, want to invest in you. You have to find a really, really good partnership with someone who's looking for a unique story and a unique opportunity and willing to lose money on it because of its cultural value, that's a really hard sell right now. I wouldn't back it. If I was a publisher and I'm a black fella and I'm in it for just the money, I wouldn't back it, personally, because I'm in it for the money, right? If I'm in it for the cultural heritage. So, getting discovered, and how are you going to get your game out there and maintain your First Nations story agency, if I tie it back there, is really, really tough. It is really tough. So, what we need to do is bring, in my opinion, you need to look at, well, if anyone's interested, for the opportunities to create unique, valuable partnerships, okay? You may or may not have seen that we at Awesome Blak had partnered with the Powerhouse before it all fell apart, literally 2 weeks after, 2 weeks before, sorry. This was a partnership that was helping to fund the development and the success of the game, but at the same time, looking at the game from a cultural heritage perspective and how the game, because they had seen what we had done, how the game was able to progress this at a different level to just commercial level. It was actually contributing to the cultural heritage, and they wanted to ensure that that was captured and recorded. And that blew me away to begin with. I honestly had never thought about that. If Xavier Ho was here, Xavier Ho planted this seed originally in my mind with Pride at Play and conversations about that. And you should 100% see Pride at Play. It's amazing if it comes back or comes to your city. But I think that this then created an opportunity for us to market the game, which we had not done very well and had not started early enough. But it gave us an opportunity to see the power of that discoverability in a different way. We weren't looking at wish lists. We weren't looking at TikTok. We weren't doing anything. But we had, you know, people now going, oh, shit, you partnered with the Powerhouse? Like, what? Like, it gave almost like a kudos to it, right? Like a gravitas, sorry, maybe a gravitas to it is what I was trying to say. So I felt this was allowing us, and the partnership with the Powerhouse specifically took no agency, no control, and did not take the IP away. This is a really good partnership. We had full control over the game, full control over what we were saying. They were just going to care for the build that we gave them. They were just going to care for it. I'm like, this is really nice. So these are the types of opportunities that are, I think, very rare, but they help with the discoverability. They help with you as a First Nations studio and a First Nations, keeping your First Nations agency strong. And then from there gave almost some gravitas to the whole thing, which I'm really sorry, Powerhouse, because it fell apart.
Yeah, I have so much to say about that as well, because you've shared so much important information in that. So just going back to what you were saying before as well, is less about the economic impact and more about, the cultural impact as well. You go back to a lot of Indigenous cultures and they plan 7 generations ahead. They're like, we can't make this decision if it's going to impact 7 generations ahead. So, going back to so many things like mining and everything, it's just more about what's immediate, what's right now. That's a lot of what Western culture is. So that's kind of where we're coming at it from a very different angle. Again, when we're creating these kinds of stories as well, is thinking about it of what's my great grandchild going to think of this as well, and cataloging that. And again as well, I just want to mention with discoverability, I know everyone's talking about TikTok and how great it is for marketing, but it's actually not a culturally safe space for mob or anyone who is in a minority group, anyone who has a sexuality that gets oppressed online as well. And so, I'm constantly on TikTok, but the amount of my friends who are Indigenous and they post something that's harmless, it's black joy, it's beautiful, gets absolutely torn to shreds by racists online constantly. Yeah. So I'm actually so frustrated by it at this point of people talking about that's the way to market, because I'm like, well, we can't though. It's not we're taking on that emotional burden because it's always just us, right? So like say if like we had have been running that up, it probably would have just been Barmy and I having to like vent to each other every day of what these racists and trolls are saying online.
What did they say about me on TikTok?
Yeah, like I kid you not, I've been thinking about like how to make like anti-racism bots. I've been reading articles about it because apparently there's like research about how it's actually made, like, because they did it where they threw it back on the people who are trolling to say, oh, like, why do you feel that way? What do you think you can do to change that? So as soon as it was being thrown back on the people, it actually like saw an outcome of change. So, you know, it's like these things have to go into your thought process if you're going to work with like First Nations stories as well. Because it's like, do you start making like bots to tackle it? Because it's so like relentless. So all these things have to come on board. And we were talking about this earlier as well. Because like, again, like when we are in these positions, like we can't just speak as individuals. People tend to expect us to speak for the entire community. And that's why like I wanted to mention like we're all so different. So like I'm never going to try to speak for anyone here because that's not my place, you know. So
if you didn't see the GUC talk, yes, GUC shout out in the front row, they spoke about the difference between representation and depiction and the white lens and the black lens. And I do think that's the really great point you raised there, is that almost every strategy at the moment is through a white lens. It is through a white lens, and that is an incredibly difficult path to walk as a First Nations studio, as a First Nations person in the games industry, because you're 100% right. If we were to follow the script, I almost guarantee the output would be different. Now, that might be different if we were just like a First Nations studio making, I don't know, Tetris. No one knows it's a First Nations game. Like, oh, there might be a First Nations studio. If we had no faces or anything, it's, oh, here's the gameplay. It's just Tetris. But that wasn't what we were making, because why? We want to see our stories and we want to see ourselves in games. And so we're making that, which then puts us right in the target, basically. Yeah, 100%. That's a really excellent point. Should we keep moving?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I want to see if people got questions.
Time, by the way?
What have I got? Investment. Oh my gosh. I think we spoke about this. Yeah, look.
Cool.
We got 10 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Oh, I don't know how we breezed through
investment,
that.
really simple. I said it about the partnerships. It's all about partnerships. It's all about people wanting to invest in the vision and the idea of the studio, and for blackfellas to keep that agency. We have to keep that agency, right? I mentioned the powerhouse, but we had a lot of support from a lot of people, right? Like we had Screen Oz initially, then we had Screen New South Wales, we had Powerhouse, we have IGEA, lots and lots and lots of incredible support. The one thing I will say on this really quickly, because, you know, I harp on this all the time, it's still incredibly difficult because Brooke was in Broome, Will was in Queensland, and I got no help from Screen West and no help from Screen Queensland, basically. Not that they didn't want to help, not that they're bad people. There are policies and procedures that make it incredibly difficult, and they do not support blackfellas. So by definition, therefore, those policies are anti-Indigenous. Thank you very much. Staff
I'm not going to
culture.
talk about that as well, because otherwise we're going to run over time.
Yeah. Don't let me get on that soapbox. We talk about staff culture. We really kind of touched on this a bit. Do you want to touch on it anymore? Or?
No, I think we kind of really covered it from the beginning, because Ben's the best boss I've ever had. So if anyone wants to hire him, please do. Like, again, it was just more that like family-centered model, which was so important. Like, again, because like we both have children as well. It's like being so like understanding of that, and also like just life circumstances. Because like, I worked hospo for so long. So like even like if I was genuinely sick and like throwing up, I was like, oh, I feel bad. I can't call in sick to work. But I never ever felt like that with like Ben as my boss, because I was like, I know he's going to understand, or he'll offer for me to take the day off before I do.
Thank you. No, it's and look, you know, I think the thank you, bless. I'm amazed, but I mean, the thing is here that, and we've probably heard this many times before. There is nothing like being a blackfella working in a blackfella team. It's no experience. You can't compare. If it's a good blackfella team, that is. But like, obviously, it's when I did a lot of work in technology, it was always like, how do we create a sense of belonging for blackfellas in this incredibly white workspace or non-Indigenous workspace? You don't necessarily have to do that if you have a good culture in your all-Indigenous team. It is just by nature you belong. And we did things very differently, right? And we can't go into all the things that we did because then I'm giving away our tricks there. Nah, we're not going to do that. But it was really important, and I'm glad that you felt it was great, because that's all I need to hear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for questions? I feel like, okay.
We got a couple of minutes for questions. Come on, anyone with a question, let us know, and I'll run up and pass you the mic. Hands up, Amelia, let's go. I'll use Brooke's.
This is why Barmy has his fancy sneakers
Hi.
on.
Thank you so much. I love listening to you guys' experience. I'm really interested in you talking about the collaborative and like collectivist sort of First Nations worldview within community, because I think that in indie games at the moment there's a lot of counterculturalism around cooperatives and anti-capitalist ways of working. And, you know, I've also lived in Japan, so what you're saying about Asian cultures and collectivism really resonates with me. And so what I wonder is what you think of your experience sort of trying to create an alternative production model that's like more collectivist in a First Nation space, and how that is, I feel like that's really widely relevant to the zeitgeist of games in general. So it's like a really big question, but I guess I just wonder if you guys had any thoughts about that.
I do. So I don't know if you want to jump in first. Do you know what? Like, because we have so many hurdles who are applying for grants sometimes, and I spoke about this with you the other day, because like, you know, as soon as you say you have First Nations content, there's so much more documentation you have to put in straight away. So it's actually harder to get it done. It's not as accessible as it's being made to be on the surface level. But you know, you do see like Indigenous businesses getting it done. So I've been really looking at the structure of the Cherokee Film Institute at the moment. So they funded Fancy Dance, which is on Apple TV at the moment. So Lily Gladstone was in that film as well. And so they're looking at these models, but then doing it in their own way. If you look at Maori Land as well, like I spoke to Maddie, who like helped create that with her family. And like, I kid you not, they had no money. And the only way they made that work is because of her uncle's lawnmower business. Like they just pulled together their like physical resources. That's literally how I've produced like short films, because 30K doesn't go far. And it does not at all. But it's things like I'll reach out to other Indigenous organisations and I'll say, this is what we're doing, this is like the message, I think it's something that aligns with you and possibly you could support. Is there something you can give us in kind? I've gotten free catering for my crew through things like that. Or even at least like, you know, because you say like, I can share you on socials and like we're going to festivals, we're doing all these things. But people just want to support you because like we kind of touched on it before, but like, you know, we're doing something more than just creating a game. Like we're creating a community. We're also like making a like strong message. We want something to last. So yeah, I think that's like kind of how it's tackled, because again, like probably documentary I say is a bit more of the activist space for film in comparison. But like a lot of them really talk about resource sharing, and I think that's something we can lean into a lot, because it's like sometimes like you can't afford the equipment because it's so pricey, but someone else might have it and they're not using it. So you can say, look, like if you lend me this now, I can like, you know, pay you back with a favor later as well.
I mean, I don't have very much to add to that. I think that's it. I think it's just that community. It's just, yeah, I think it's ingrained, Amelia, in community. Like everything that we do is just from that base point, and not the individual. Ironically, I said this about my own neighbourhood, where I'm like, I don't feel like my neighbourhood's a community. Like I feel like it's just a bunch of people living in houses, and I'm like, it feels so different to me to where I and how I grew up, where it was like a community. Your neighbourhood was a community. I'm trying to put that in a relevant space, but it's unfortunately, I think, just kind of a situation. But as mob, we usually are coming from that baseline first and foremost, and it's always the first thing on your mind is like, how is this going to be seen? How is this going to be relevant? Is this advancing mob? Is this not? Like, you know, it's usually not the self first. But that's a great question, and it's a really complex one. And it's sometimes hard to articulate as well.
We can do a panel
Next year. Okay, well, let's do it. Any more questions? Amy, did you have a hand up? No? Oh, you were doing the... anyone else? Oh, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you. Like I'm saving most of my questions because catch up later for sure.
Yes, the good ones.
But Brooke, while you got the spotlight on you, I'd love to know the difference in developing narrative between screen and game that you experienced.
Ooh. See, it's interesting because this was like the privilege I got to have of working with Barmy was that I didn't have to think about the budget, which was so nice. Because like I'm so used to doing that for film and like stressing. So like for film, as the producer, I normally would never pay myself because I was like, do you know what? I'm going to see something in the back end of it when people pay for screenings, or if I'm very lucky and I win an award, I might get some money. So I'm like, I'll pay everyone else first because I know I'm the one attached to this project longer than anybody else. I know everyone else is always struggling as well. So at least pay people what they're worth. So going through those differences, I guess like film is very structured, and I feel like a lot of industries are still really learning how to like work with games, especially here in Australia. So, I mean, you can even see it where if I say like Screen West as an example, like they had games only very recently as a department because I think even Screen Oz had it a while ago and then shut it down for a while and then brought it back again because I think we're kind of in an industry that doesn't quite understand how, well, funding bodies anyway don't quite know how to handle games because like from what I've seen, like anyway with the Australian model is that you can get a lot of your funding from funding bodies where we're really lucky, like Screen Oz, you're like state grant funders as well. But, you know, you look at other countries like American ones, their models are more funded off like, you know, philanthropic, like you'll see like 8 producers on one film, but then here in Australia it's like 1 because they can get it all from like Screen Australia or someone like that. So I think that's where games is similar as well, as they're actually kind of following, I guess, like the American like film model where it's more about creating those relationships or reaching out to people, putting it out to your community and like saying things like, you know, you can contribute to this game, like just like if you can put money in our GoFundMe and things like that is where it's really different. And I think that's like way better, right? Because like the audience gets to be a part of it and gets to have a hand in like the outcome at the end. Film's very much so, blah, like there you go. Hope you enjoy. But like game, you like actually get to feel like you had a part in it. I hope that answered your question.
One of the interesting things that I found just watching Brooke from afar was like how quickly Brooke, like you said before, you could just smash out a final draft. Brooke is clearly talented and can clearly write and is like doing this, but then trying to move it into the structure for a game where you had to spend so much time learning that, because it was not about the writing. It was about how do we implement the implementation, right? So it was like, how do we move from where you're got all this talent and just get it into that format basically, right? So turning that JPEG into a PNG or whatever, you know, we have to get there. And it was really interesting to watch that because that's software skills, that's tech skills, that's understanding how to do the branching narratives in that specific format, like adapting to the kind of almost rigor of it must be like this, right? And I remember you'd be calling me, like Brooke would call me and she'd be like, I figured it out, I've got it. I can now make this happen. And I'm like, actually, that's a big thing. Like, that's a huge thing. Like, and you were like super excited about it. And so from not to jump over Brooke, but just like watching that difference, Joel, of like being able to clearly write something really, really quality in a film structure, but then just sometimes the tools are a little bit of a hamper, you know what I mean? Like they kind of hold you back a little bit until you have that light bulb, that breakthrough, and then all of a sudden it's like bang, it's off. Like I now know how to get what I'm good at, like what I can do into that required format and structure, and we're off and racing. And it was just like branches and multiple choices and all this stuff was happening and it was looping back. It was great.
So on that as well. So like actually talking about sharing those programs as well, right? Because like film, I would just send someone a script and I wouldn't actually be sitting there with them when they would read it. So like we'd have like our like team like video sessions and I'd do like a playthrough through Artisy and I'd be like, okay, someone has to choose like what you're going to be. Okay, you're this character and you're this character and you have to read these dialogues. So I'd be sitting there like a puppet master and being like, okay, this is working. And I'd be watching everyone's faces as they would read it to be like, okay, this is working, this is working. And then if something fell flat, I'd be like, okay, we're taking that out later. So that was like like something that was really cool. And I think, like again, like allowing that time for us all to like learn those programs, like it probably definitely took me that like at least 6 months to get like fully in that mode again, like the same way I am in Final Draft. That I can just go, oh, yep, okay, I can go do this now, and this code can go do this. Because, yeah, again, like looking on the Artisy website, if any of you have played Disco Elysium, the way you can see the branching narrative for that on the Artisy website is insane. But, like, it's so cool. Like, I was so pumped. I love, like, playing with stuff like that. So I'd be like, Ben, I worked out how to do this thing, and then now we can do this. And
It was a good moment. It was great.
Yeah, Ben, you spoke about it in terms of, like, required format and like learning the tools. Yeah. But Brooke, aside from like just the requirements, did you find that the interactive medium brought anything new and cool to your storytelling that you enjoyed that's like you couldn't do on film?
Yeah, you could be a lot more silly. So that was really fun. Like, you know, like for film, it's always like show, don't tell. But I felt like sometimes you do kind of have to tell in games, which is very different. So like, yeah, there'd be like a lot of options that I would choose that I'd be like, oh, I have to think about someone who wants to be like the justicey good person, who wants to be evil, or who just wants to be silly and muck around, and like choose options like that. So yeah, that's where it was really different, because I was like, I couldn't get away with this same level of silliness in film, like it wouldn't translate the same way, because like again, it's just that more immersive experience, so you can like experience it and just like joke around. So yeah.
100%, like 100%. I mean, show don't tell is that like film, you're showing someone a story, and in games, you're giving them the choice to play it the way they want. Like it's just really. I mean, you like. I remember one point you told me you're like, I'm basically writing 3 or 4 scripts. So that's it. Like it's like instead of writing one script for a film, I'm paraphrasing from a conversation we once had, where you said it's like I'm literally writing 4 scripts, Barmy, and I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work. And I think it was that was the conversation when the penny dropped, and you were like, this is a lot of work, and I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, like there's a lot to write here, but it was exciting for you too, because you were like, I'm getting to write 4 scripts. Like I'm getting to write all of these different interactions, and like you said, like how would I? Again, not to put words in your mouth, but paraphrasing, but like, how am I going to be a real asshole in this scene? Like, what if someone wants to be like a real? And we had to come up with this whole structure of not good or evil. And we're really getting to the weeds now, but not good or evil, but colonized and not colonized in this sense of messaging, because we had these really deep conversations of it's not really good or evil. It's not like we're saying that that's an evil response. It's just a more colonized response, right? And that response could have been coming from a blackfella, right? We were not excluding blackfellas from the colonized mindset at all, right? And so that's a really, and again, I'm again putting my own twist and spin on this. I can only imagine that was a difficult thing to get into. Like, hey, Brooke, I want you to be some really colonized blackfella today. Can you write that for us? Like, can you imagine? Like, okay, cool, yeah, I love ScoMo, yeah. I love mining, let's take all the minerals out of the planet. Like that type of stuff. It's hard for a blackfella to get into that. Like, it's kind of easy to joke about it, and you know, I can sit here and we can come up with a D&D character right now who loves that stuff. But that's a difficult thing, Joel, I think, to kind of say like, and I imagine that's kind of different. You're not just writing characters, you're writing literally characters for whole scripts and whole 4 games, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it hurts my soul to try and write evil things. Like, I really struggle to put myself in that mindset. But like, that's the thing. Like, you do meet people like that, and like characters who do influence your work, and like even things like you know.
I just need to steal my Foley.
No. Oh yeah, we'll wrap it up so people can get food. But yeah, like that's the thing with like writing as well. Like they always say, like, you know, a lot of people say like you shouldn't become a writer until after you're at least 25 because you haven't experienced enough life yet, which I find so interesting because, like, you know, some people might have had a lot happen in their like younger years. So I think that comes into it too, is just like, you know, just be curious and like go out and meet like lots of different people, hear different perspectives, so you can put yourself in those shoes to go, okay, if I was a terrible human being, what would I do in this situation? Anyway, should we wrap it there, or do you have another question? Yeah.
No, I was going to say, yeah, no good or evil, but terrible people.
Terrible, that's right, yeah. Terrible,
Yeah, thank you so much.
Things.
No
Cool.
worries.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Good colour. Woo!
Fun.
I'm always here.